The cold silver of a butter knife bit sharp into my palm. Hard enough to dent skin, hard enough to burn. The entire Carter family stared, 20 pairs of unblinking eyes pinned to my chair at the Thanksgiving table. My husband's voice cut through the dead silence, cold and final. Apologize, or get out. Gravy congealed on fine white china. The sharp, spicy smell of burnt cinnamon rolls hung thick in the air. No one breathed. No one moved a muscle. I'd done nothing wrong. Not a single thing. Yet I sat there, judged and trapped, in the home I'd cleaned, cooked for, and loved for 6 years. Jake's jaw tightened. He folded his sleeves slow, the way he always did before he lied to everyone. His mother smiled thin, triumphant, from the head of the table. I stared at my 3-year-old son, Leo, asleep in his high chair, chubby cheek pressed to a crumpled napkin. His tiny hand still curled around a plastic turkey toy I'd bought him that morning. I did not beg. I did not flinch. I did not speak a single word of apology. Instead, I set the butter knife down. Slow and steady. The clink echoed loud enough to rattle every crystal glass in the room. I stood up. And I walked straight into a secret that would burn every last one of them to the ground. 3 years earlier, the rain came down soft and warm over Maple Creek, the small Ohio town I'd called home since marrying Jake Carter. The summer thunderstorms here never raged violent. They just lingered, soaking the green lawns, dripping off porch roofs, and muffling the whole world into something quiet and safe. I was 29 then, a stay-at-home mom with a toddler and a marriage that looked perfect from every neighbor's front yard. My house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, white siding with a wraparound porch and a maple tree out front that blazed red every autumn. I baked sourdough bread every Sunday. I volunteered at the community church food bank. I waved at every passing car. People called me the lucky one. The girl who'd married the town's golden boy. Jake Carter, local high school football star, Army veteran, small business owner with a spotless public reputation. He was handsome, charming, well-liked by every elder in town. No one had a bad word to say about him. No one but me. I knew the cracks no one else saw. I twisted the simple silver wedding band on my left finger, a nervous habit I'd picked up early in our marriage. The metal was worn smooth after 6 years, thin at the edges from constant rubbing. It used to feel like a promise. Now it felt like a cage. The screen door creaked behind me. I knew that sound by heart. Third board from the bottom always squeaked when Jake pushed it open too fast. "You're out here again?" Jake's voice was easy, casual, the warm drawl he used for public faces. No edge, no coldness. Just the charming man everyone adored. I turned from the porch railing, where I'd been watching rain beat on the rose bushes I'd planted the year Leo was born. The scent of wet soil and fresh-cut grass filled my nose, sweet and familiar. "Just needed air," I said softly. Jake leaned against the railing beside me, his shoulder almost touching mine. He wore his usual weekend uniform, faded flannel, dark jeans, work boots dusted with gravel from his construction site. To anyone watching, we looked like a happy, ordinary small-town couple. "You've been distant lately," he said. His tone was gentle, concerned. Too gentle. I knew what was coming next. I'd learned to read his patterns long ago. Kind words preceded demands. Soft concern preceded control. "I'm tired," I answered truthfully. "Leo's been teething. Up every night." Jake nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. They stayed sharp, calculating, like he was weighing whether my excuse was acceptable. He reached up and fixed his cuff, a tiny, habitual movement he made every time he hit a lie. "Well, don't wear yourself out," he said. "We've got family coming for Thanksgiving. Whole crew. You know how my mother hates a messy house." A faint, bitter taste rose in my throat. I knew exactly how Margaret Carter hated messes. She hated untidy rooms, imperfect meals, and most of all, she hated me not being perfectly obedient. "I'll have everything ready," I said. Jake smiled, pressed a quick, hollow kiss to my forehead, and walked back inside. The screen door creaked shut behind him, cutting off the fresh rain air and sealing me back into the quiet pressure of my life. I stood alone on the porch for another 10 minutes, twisting my wedding band until my finger ached. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then fell silent. The rain kept falling, slow and endless. I had no idea then that the upcoming Thanksgiving dinner would not just be a family meal. It would be the day I stopped being the quiet, obedient wife everyone expected. The day I stopped hiding the truth. But the truth had been growing inside me for 2 years by that rainy afternoon. A cold, quiet seed planted the night I found the first anomaly in Jake's business accounts. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen island, screen glowing pale blue in the dark, and my eye caught a line item that didn't belong, a wire transfer of $18,000 to a shell company registered in Delaware. I hadn't been a bookkeeper for nothing before Leo was born. I knew how to trace numbers. I knew the smell of rot beneath fresh paint. That night, while Jake snored upstairs, I dug deeper, my fingers trembling on the trackpad, and I uncovered the first layer of his embezzlement scheme: fake subcontractor invoices, double-billed materials, client funds funneled into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I didn't confront him. I didn't even close the laptop with a slam. I just sat there in the dark, breathing slow, and I realized the man I'd married was a thief. A charming, beloved thief who shook hands with deacons on Sunday and stole from widows' renovation funds on Monday. From that night on, I became a ghost in my own home, gathering evidence in silence. I copied every incriminating document onto an encrypted USB drive I hid inside a hollowed-out Jane Austen novel on the top shelf of Leo's nursery. I photographed Jake's secret phone, the one he kept in the glove box of his truck, and found the messages to his mistress, a young, sharp-faced real estate agent named Tanya who called him Big Cat and signed her texts with a string of pink heart emojis. I noted every late-night business meeting, every unexplained cash withdrawal, every time he adjusted his shirt cuff before lying to my face. I built a file so thorough it could have put him in federal prison for a decade. And I waited. Because revenge, real revenge, requires the perfect moment. It requires the whole family to be watching. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving blurred into a cycle of cleaning, cooking, and quiet anxiety. Maple Creek thrived on tradition, and the Carter family thrived on perfection. Their holiday gatherings were less celebration and more performance. Every surface in our house was scrubbed spotless. Every linen pressed crisp. Every meal prepped days in advance. I woke at 5 each morning, long before Leo or Jake stirred, to tend to the endless list of tasks. And every night, after the house fell silent, I pulled out my hidden laptop and scheduled the emails. Dozens of them. Each one coded to a timer. Each one addressed to a different pillar of Jake's world: the chairman of the local business ethics board, the senior pastor at Christ the Redeemer Church, the head of the Ohio State Contractors Licensing Board, the editor of the Maple Creek Gazette, the loan officer at the bank that held Jake's construction loans, the elderly widow whose entire retirement fund he'd siphoned into a fake renovation project. I attached every scrap of evidence. I drafted a personal note to each recipient, brief and devastating. And I set the delivery date for Thanksgiving Day at exactly 2:15 p.m., 20 minutes after I planned to walk out the door. I also made quieter arrangements. I contacted an Irish immigration solicitor through a secure video call at 3 in the morning, my voice barely a whisper, and secured my son's citizenship rights through my mother's ancestry. I rented the cottage in Clonakilty sight unseen, paying 6 months' rent up front from my secret freelance savings. I packed 2 suitcases and hid them in the attic crawl space behind the Christmas decorations, a place Jake never climbed. I trained myself to smile at Margaret's insults, to nod at Jake's lies, to move through my own home like a stage actress playing the perfect wife, all while a clock ticked down inside my chest toward the moment I would burn their world to ash. Margaret Carter arrived 3 days early, as she always did. She moved through my home like a silent inspector, running a finger over shelf edges, checking dust, critiquing my cooking before I even served it. She carried the sharp, clean scent of lavender perfume and old money judgment. Her silver hair was always coiled tight, her clothes immaculate, her words soft but cutting. You overcooked the cranberry sauce last year, she said on her first night, leaning against my kitchen counter while I peeled potatoes. Don't make the same mistake. I kept my hands moving, knife steady on the vegetable skin. I won't, I said. See that you don't. She paused, eyes sweeping over me. Jake works so hard. He deserves a peaceful home. A presentable wife. The words hung in the warm kitchen air, thick and unspoken. I knew what she meant. Be quiet. Be perfect. Be grateful he chose you. I'd spent 6 years trying to be all those things. It was never enough. But now, in the final days, I almost pitied her. She had no idea that the son she worshipped had embezzled from the church's roof restoration fund, that the family's pristine reputation was a house of cards I was about to blow down with a single breath. I imagined her face when she opened the email detailing every financial sin her golden boy had committed, and a small, private smile touched my lips as I sliced the potatoes into thin, even rounds. Jake's brothers arrived the next day, loud, boisterous men who drank too much beer and told crude jokes while watching football. Their wives followed, quiet women who nodded at Margaret's every word and never questioned the family order. I watched them all with new eyes now, cataloging their petty cruelties and their blind loyalty. Marcus, the eldest brother, had once laughed when Jake called me just the housekeeping at a family barbecue. Patricia, his wife, had seen Margaret reduce me to tears over a slightly burnt pie crust and had said nothing, just turned away and refreshed her sweet tea. They were all complicit. And they were all about to learn what happens when you spend years mistaking a woman's silence for submission. The entire Carter clan operated by one unwritten rule: the family name came first. Truth, fairness, even basic kindness came second. By Thanksgiving morning, the house hummed with their noise. Laughter echoed through the halls. Football commentary blared from the living room TV. The oven roared nonstop, filling every room with the smell of roasted turkey and baked pie. I moved through the chaos like a ghost. I fed Leo, changed his clothes, wiped his sticky fingers, and kept cooking. No one asked if I was tired. No one thanked me. But inside, I was a coiled spring of purpose. Every time I passed the hallway mirror, I met my own eyes and reminded myself, 2:15 p.m. The emails would fly. The world would crack open. I just had to endure a few more hours of their noise. Midday, while the family gathered in the living room chatting, I found a crumpled receipt tucked in Jake's coat pocket while I hung up his winter jacket. It slipped out fluttering, landing soft on the hardwood floor. I bent to pick it up. My breath caught sharp in my chest. It was a receipt for a diamond necklace. Expensive. Dazzling. Dated 2 weeks prior. Not purchased for me. My fingers went cold, the way they did when the winter pipes burst at 3 in the morning and nobody came to fix them. I stared at the tiny printed words until they blurred together. The itemized description read Platinum Infinity Pendant, engraved T.S. Tanya Summers, the real estate agent with the pink heart emojis. He'd engraved her initials on a necklace while I was home scrubbing baseboards for his mother's visit. I folded the receipt smaller, and slipped it into the inner pocket of my apron. No one saw me. No one paid me any mind. But in that quiet second, the last fragile thread of loyalty I'd kept for Jake snapped clean. I'd suspected small lies for months. Late nights at work. Vague excuses. Phone calls taken outside. But this was proof. Hard, unignorable proof. And instead of breaking me, it made my resolve diamond hard. A minute later, Jake walked into the hallway. His eyes locked on mine instantly. He fixed his cuff, that tiny telltale motion, and smiled. "Everything good in here, honey?" he asked. I held his gaze. I did not look away. "Everything's fine," I said, and I meant it for the first time in years. Everything was finally in place. He nodded, satisfied, and walked past me into the kitchen. He never knew I already held his secret in my pocket, and that I'd been holding so much more for so much longer. Thanksgiving dinner started pleasant on the surface. Sunlight streamed through the dining room windows, gilding the polished wood table and crystal glassware. Plates piled high with turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, and pie lined every seat. Leo sat in his high chair beside me, munching softly on a roll, his little eyes heavy with sleep. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, my heart tight and tender. I stole a glance at the clock on the mantel. 1:45. 30 more minutes. The family talked loud over one another. They discussed town gossip, church events, Jake's booming business. They praised him endlessly, calling him the pride of the Carter family. He basked in it, chin lifted, chest puffed, adjusting his cuffs like a king surveying his loyal subjects. I almost laughed out loud. 30 minutes, and every person at this table would know he was a thief and an adulterer. The pride of the Carter family would become the shame of Maple Creek. No one spoke of me. No one acknowledged the weeks of work that made the perfect meal possible. Then Margaret turned the conversation sharp and sudden, directing it straight at me. "I heard you skipped the women's auxiliary meeting last week, Clara," she said, her voice clear enough to hush the whole table. I paused, fork halfway to my plate. "I had a sick toddler at home," I answered calmly. A low titter rippled through the family. Not kind laughter. Dismissive laughter. "Every other mother in town manages her duties and her children," Margaret said coolly. "You're just not trying hard enough." My throat tightened. I bit the inside of my lip hard, tasting sharp metallic blood. I refused to flinch. Refused to show weakness. I thought of the timer counting down, the emails queued up, the reckoning barreling toward this room like a freight train. I almost told her then. Almost leaned across the table and whispered, "In 10 minutes, your son's empire crumbles, Margaret. Chew slowly." "That's unfair," I said quietly instead. The room went dead silent again. Every eye locked on me, shocked that I dared to push back. Jake's head snapped toward me. His warm public smile vanished completely. His eyes turned cold, icy, unforgiving. "Clara." He said my name slow and dangerous. "She's wrong," I repeated, steady. "I do everything for this family. I don't deserve to be criticized for caring for my sick child." One of his brothers scoffed. "Typical. Always playing the victim." Another cousin chimed in. "Margaret's just looking out for your reputation, Clara. You should be grateful." The table turned against me in an instant. One quiet, truthful sentence, and I became the villain of their perfect holiday story. Jake pushed his chair back loud. The scrape of wood on hardwood cut through the room. He stood tall, broad, every inch the dominant family man in front of his relatives. He looked down at me, no love left in his eyes. Only harsh, unyielding judgment. "Apologize to my mother. Now." I lifted my chin. My hands trembled slightly in my lap, but my voice did not shake. "I have nothing to apologize for." Margaret's lips twisted into a cold, victorious smile. She'd wanted this fight. She'd waited for me to break the perfect silence. Jake's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle flex in his cheek. He leaned down, voice low and brutal, meant only for me but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Apologize or leave." Those 6 simple words hung in the frozen air, heavy and final. The entire family watched, waiting for my humiliation. Waiting for me to crumble and beg forgiveness. The clock on the mantel ticked once, twice. 5 minutes to 2:15. I almost smiled. No one stood up for me. No one spoke a word of fairness. In their eyes, the wife always yielded. The outsider always bowed to the family. I glanced down at Leo, now half asleep, his small hand still clutching his turkey toy. I thought of the endless days of cleaning and cooking, the lonely nights waiting for Jake to come home, the quiet lies I'd ignored to keep the peace. I thought of the diamond necklace receipt tucked safe in my apron pocket. Proof that his perfect life was built on cheating and deceit. Proof that he was the one who should be apologizing. I stood slowly. My chair scraped loud against the floor. I looked Jake dead in the eyes, past his charming mask, into the cold, selfish man underneath. "I'm not apologizing," I said clearly. "I'm leaving." Shock ripped across the table. Gasps echoed around me. Margaret's smile dropped instantly, replaced by raw fury. Jake's face turned red with rage. "Don't be ridiculous. You have nowhere to go." I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. I already had every plan made. Every secret prepared. And somewhere, in the digital silence of a server farm 3 states away, a clock struck 2:15, and the first email began to send. I bent down, lifted Leo gently from his high chair, and settled his sleepy body against my hip. He mumbled a soft, sleepy mama and rested his head on my shoulder. I walked out of the dining room, past the stunned family, past my furious husband, and headed straight up the stairs. Behind me, the room erupted in noise. Shouting. Arguments. Margaret's shrill voice demanding Jake fix this. The brothers laughing in disbelief. But beneath the chaos, I heard the first distant chime of a phone notification. Then another. And another. Like dominoes falling in slow motion. I didn't look back. Not once. Upstairs, I moved fast and calm. My hands didn't shake anymore. The fog of fear that had lingered for years lifted suddenly, clear and sharp. I could hear Jake's phone buzzing relentlessly in his pocket downstairs, a frantic, angry insect of incoming disaster. He was too busy yelling at his mother to check it yet. But soon. Soon. I pulled 2 suitcases from the top of the closet. One for me. One for Leo. I'd packed them 3 nights prior, while Jake slept. Every essential item folded neat and tight. Every document I needed tucked in a waterproof folder. I grabbed my coat, Leo's tiny puffer jacket, his favorite stuffed bear. I slipped my phone, my wallet, and the crumpled receipt into my pocket. From the hallway downstairs, I heard Jake's heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. Fast. Angry. And underneath the anger, a new note, panic. He'd checked his phone. "Clara. Stop this childish act right now," he shouted, but his voice cracked on the last word. I slung the suitcases toward the bedroom door. They rolled smooth across the carpet. I knelt down, adjusted Leo's hat on his head, and kissed his warm forehead. "We're going on an adventure, baby," I whispered to him. "A safe one." Leo mumbled sleepily and snuggled closer. He had no idea we were leaving everything we'd ever known behind. Jake burst into the bedroom, chest heaving, face dark with anger and something else, fear, raw and ugly. He skidded to a stop when he saw the packed suitcases, the ready coats, my steady expression. His phone was clutched in his white-knuckled hand, screen glowing with an email from the state licensing board, subject line, urgent, formal investigation into Carter Construction, embezzlement allegations. "What is this?" he demanded, voice shaking. "What did you do?" I turned to face him, still calm. "I told the truth, Jake. To everyone. All at once." His eyes flicked over me, confused and enraged. "You're not leaving this house." "I already am," I said. "You have no money. No family here. No friends who'll take you in. You'll be back before nightfall," he snapped. His voice was sharp, arrogant, certain of his control, but it was a mask now, thin as tissue paper, and we both knew it. He truly believed he'd broken me completely. Believed I was too weak, too dependent, too small to survive without him. He had no idea I'd been surviving him for years, hoarding strength like a miser hoards gold. I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen once, and held it up for him to see. 2 one-way plane tickets. Overseas. Leaving in 4 hours. Jake's confident face crumpled. His smug certainty vanished in an instant. He stared at the tickets, then back at my face, and for the first time in 6 years, I saw him without any mask at all. He was just a small, terrified man watching his entire life collapse. "What?" he breathed. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. I reached down, grabbed the suitcase handles, and stepped past him toward the door. "You wanted me to leave," I said quietly. "So I'm leaving. And I'm taking every lie you ever told with me." Jake grabbed my arm hard, his fingers digging tight into my skin. His grip was painful, desperate. "Don't do this," he said, voice dropping from anger to panic. "Think about Leo. Think about our family." I stared at his hand on my arm, then lifted my eyes back to his face. "You stopped thinking about us a long time ago, Jake. The necklace for Tanya Summers? The Cayman Islands account? The widow Henderson's retirement fund? I know all of it. And now, so does everyone else." His hand fell away as if I'd burned him. His face went gray. He stumbled back a step, phone buzzing again, this time with a call from his bank's fraud department. I didn't wait to watch the rest. I pulled my arm free from his grip and walked past him, down the stairs. The entire Carter family waited at the bottom of the steps, all 20 of them, silent and staring. But the atmosphere had shifted. Margaret was clutching her own phone, face white as bone china, reading an email from the church council demanding an emergency meeting regarding misappropriated funds. Marcus was shouting into his cell phone, his construction subcontractor contract terminated effective immediately. Patricia was weeping, more frightened than sad. The whole room hummed with the electric crackle of a family discovering they were standing on a collapsing bridge. Their smug judgment was gone. In its place was pure, stunned disbelief, and dawning blame. Margaret looked up at me as I descended the stairs, her eyes wild. "What have you done to my son's reputation?" she hissed. I paused on the last step, Leo's warm weight steady on my hip. "I didn't damage his reputation, Margaret. I just stopped protecting it." I walked straight through their midst, suitcases rolling over the hardwood floor, sleeping son held tight in my arms. I did not pause. I did not apologize. I did not beg. I opened the front door. Cold November wind rushed in, sharp and fresh, sweeping away the stuffy smell of roasted turkey and judgment. Behind me, I heard Jake's footsteps stumbling down the stairs, his voice broken. "Please, Clara, we can fix this. We can make a deal." I didn't turn. "No deals, Jake. No fixing. That's the point." I stepped out onto the front porch, onto the familiar wooden planks I'd stood on 100 quiet nights before. The sky was pale gray, soft over the small town rooftops. I could hear the distant sound of sirens, maybe unrelated, maybe not. News traveled fast in Maple Creek. I got into my waiting car, a ride I'd scheduled days earlier. I set the suitcases in the back, settled Leo in his car seat, and closed the door. Through the windshield, I watched Jake and his family crowd the front doorway, staring after me in stunned silence. Margaret was clutching the doorframe, her perfect silver bun unraveling, her lavender perfume no longer smelling like judgment but like decay. Jake's phone screen shattered as he hurled it against the porch railing. It didn't matter. The emails had already landed. The truth was already spreading through town like wildfire through dry autumn grass. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I pulled away from the house, away from the perfect lie I'd lived in for 6 years. I did not look back. But I did turn on the radio, and the local news station was already talking about a disturbing financial scandal rocking a prominent Maple Creek family. I smiled, and I drove. The drive to the regional airport took 45 minutes. The roads were quiet, lined with bare autumn trees and empty farm fields. Sunlight filtered thin through gray clouds, casting pale light over every familiar landmark. My phone vibrated constantly in the cup holder, calls from Jake, from Margaret, from his brothers, from the church pastor, from the town newspaper. I ignored them all. I'd already said everything I needed to say. I'd lived in Maple Creek my entire adult life. Every road, every store, every neighbor was known to me. But as we drove farther away, the town felt less like home and more like a cage I'd finally escaped. I felt light, giddy, almost drunk on freedom. Leo slept soundly in the back seat, his soft breathing steady and calm. Every few minutes, I glanced in the rearview mirror, just to see his peaceful face, to remind myself why I fought so hard. My hands were steady on the wheel now. The tight anxiety in my chest had loosened, replaced by a quiet, fierce resolve. I'd spent months preparing for this day, saving hidden cash, securing overseas housing, gathering proof, waiting for the exact moment Jake and his family showed their true cruelty. Thanksgiving was never random. I chose this day. I chose their perfect family gathering to shatter their perfect facade. And I'd chosen 2:15 p.m. because it was the exact minute Jake's father had founded Carter Construction 30 years ago, a detail no one but Jake and Margaret knew. I'd wanted the poetry of it. The moment the company was born became the moment it died. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Once. Then again. Then non-stop. A text from Mandy, the only one I'd half expected. Clara, it's chaos here. Dad's old business partners are calling. The bank froze everything. Mom is hyperventilating. I think you might have actually killed her. Not literally. I'm scared but also, relieved? Call me when you're safe. I didn't reply yet. But I smiled. Mandy would come around. I'd planted that seed months ago, when I'd confided in her over coffee that I was documenting some irregularities in Jake's business. She'd looked at me with wide, frightened eyes, and then, after her signature 2-second pause, she'd whispered, "If you ever need me to testify, I will." I arrived at the small regional airport as the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky. The parking lot was half empty, quiet except for the distant hum of airplane engines. I parked the car, gathered my sleeping son and my suitcases, and walked toward the glass terminal doors. The cold wind bit at my cheeks, sharp and clean. I felt reborn. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and sanitizer. A few travelers sat scattered across plastic waiting chairs, quiet and tired from holiday travel. I checked in for my international flight without hesitation. The ticket agent smiled politely, unaware of the storm I'd just unleashed on a small Ohio town. Once I had my boarding passes in hand, I found a quiet corner bench and sat down, Leo still asleep in my arms. I finally pulled out my phone. The screen was flooded with hundreds of notifications. Calls, texts, social media messages, email alerts pouring in nonstop. But I only opened my email outbox. Confirmation after confirmation. Sent successfully. The widow Henderson had received her evidence. The bank had received their records. The pastor had received a detailed accounting of the stolen roof fund, along with a promise that I would testify if needed. The local newspaper editor had received a full, sourced dossier and a note, "Hold the front page. Happy Thanksgiving." A low, bitter laugh escaped me, quiet enough not to wake Leo. They'd humiliated me on Thanksgiving. They'd demanded I apologize for nothing. They'd thought I was weak, powerless, trapped forever in their shadow. They had no idea I'd been holding all the cards, counting down the days until I could lay them on the table one by one. My phone buzzed again, a new incoming call from an unknown local number. I answered it on speaker, curious to hear the chaos I'd left behind. A frantic female voice burst through the line, tight with shock and panic. It was Jake's oldest sister, Mandy, the one who'd always stayed quiet during the family cruelty, the one who'd never joined in the mocking. Her voice trembled but held a new, unfamiliar edge, something like hope. "Clara," Mandy said, breathless. "What did you do? Everyone's phones are blowing up. The business board is calling Jake nonstop. His clients are pulling out. The church elders are asking questions. The police just arrived, something about a fraud investigation. The bank closed all his accounts. Margaret is screaming that you've murdered the family name. And I think I'm smiling. Is that terrible?" I stroked Leo's soft hair gently, my voice calm and steady. "I did what your family forced me to do. And no, it's not terrible. It's honest." Mandy paused, that 2-second hesitation she always had before every serious answer, her signature habit. "You knew this would happen. You've been planning this for years." "I did," I admitted. Why not just leave quietly, she asked, half desperate, half confused. I stared out the airport window at the empty runway, at the freedom stretching out ahead of me. Because quiet people get hurt forever, I said. I wasn't going to hurt anymore. And I wasn't going to let them keep hurting other people. The widow whose retirement fund Jake stole? She's going to get her money back now. The church is going to get its roof. The truth is the only thing that sets anyone free, Mandy. Even you. Mandy fell silent for a long moment. I could hear distant shouting in the background, Jake's furious roar, Margaret's shrill screaming, the slam of a police car door. The entire Carter family was unraveling fast, and Mandy was still on the line with me, breathing slow and steady. They're destroyed, Mandy said quietly. Everything Jake built. Everything the family bragged about. It's all falling apart in one afternoon. He's being handcuffed, Clara. In the front yard. The neighbors are filming. I twisted my wedding band one last time, then slipped it off my finger completely. The metal felt light, foreign, useless in my palm. He built it on lies, I said. Lies always fall apart eventually. And handcuffs look good on him. What about Leo? Mandy asked. Her voice softened, genuine concern breaking through her fear. You're taking him overseas forever? I'm taking him to safety, I corrected. Away from cruelty. Away from lies. Away from a family that humiliates mothers in front of their children for no reason. He'll grow up knowing that his mother stood up to bullies and won. Another shout erupted in the background, louder this time. Jake's voice, raging my name, then muffled as he was pushed into a squad car. Mandy rushed to speak again. He's begging everyone to call you. He's saying he'll apologize. He'll change. He'll do anything if you come back. He's crying, Clara. Real tears. I've never seen him cry. A cold, knowing smile touched my lips. I knew that act. I'd seen it 100 times before. Empty promises. Desperate manipulation. He's not sorry for what he did to me, I said. He's sorry he got caught. Those tears are for his own ruined future, not for me or Leo. I ended the call without another word, but not before Mandy whispered, I'll send everything. The recordings. My testimony. I'll burn every bridge to keep you and Leo safe. I dropped the wedding band into my coat pocket, a final souvenir of the life I was leaving behind. Leo stirred in my arms, blinking sleepy blue eyes up at me. Mommy, he mumbled. It's okay, baby, I whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. We're free now. And we're going to a place where the air tastes like the ocean and nobody yells. As I waited for my boarding announcement, my phone continued to buzz non-stop. Dozens of new emails flooded in. Town gossip chains exploding. Business termination notices. Church meeting alerts. A text from an unknown number, probably Tanya Summers, that simply read, I didn't know he was married. I deleted it without replying. She knew. They always know. The perfect Carter family Thanksgiving had turned into their perfect downfall. All because they chose to humiliate the one person who'd always told the truth, and who'd been quietly, patiently, brilliantly preparing to burn their world to the ground. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the clean airport air, letting go of 6 years of quiet suffering. They told me to apologize or leave. I left. And I took every last one of their secrets with me. But the biggest secret of all, the one that would redefine everything, still sat quiet in my pocket, waiting for the right moment to break completely open, a USB drive containing not just Jake's crimes, but evidence of a much larger, multi-contractor fraud ring involving 2 of his brothers and a county official. That particular email was scheduled to send at midnight, directly to the FBI's white-collar crime division. I tucked Leo deeper into the crook of my arm, his small cheek warm against the shoulder of my winter coat, and stared out the fogged terminal window. Gray November clouds hung low over the Ohio countryside, swallowing the faint glow of distant farm street lights. My thumb brushed the empty ring finger on my left hand, a quiet, muscle memory habit I had yet to shake. The wedding band rested heavy in the inner fold of my coat pocket, a useless relic of 6 years spent bending myself thin to fit a family that never intended to welcome me. Mandy's frantic voice still echoed in my head, but now it was joined by something else, the sound of her whispered promise to send evidence. She would face brutal retaliation the moment our call was discovered. Margaret never tolerated anyone who sided with the outsider, not even her own daughter. I spared a quiet prayer for her under my breath, soft enough that only the hum of overhead fluorescent lights could carry it. The airport air reeked of burnt drip coffee and lemon-scented sanitizer, two sharp, competing smells that anchored me firmly in the present, far away from the chaos I had abandoned back in Maple Creek. My phone vibrated once more against the plastic bench beneath my thigh. I glanced down. A news alert from the Maple Creek Gazette's website: local businessman Jake Carter arrested on Thanksgiving amid explosive fraud allegations. The article quoted an anonymous source close to the family and featured a photograph of Jake being led away in handcuffs, his shirt cuff uncharacteristically rumpled. I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet, vast relief. Justice wasn't a wildfire that destroyed indiscriminately, it was a surgical blade, and I had wielded it with precision. A crackling announcement echoed across the terminal speakers. My international flight began final boarding. I shifted Leo's weight gently, careful not to rouse him, and dragged my 2 rolling suitcases toward the gate. The wheels clicked steadily against polished linoleum, a calm, rhythmic sound that drowned out the distant buzz of panicked phone calls still flooding my device. I switched my mobile to airplane mode halfway down the narrow walkway, severing every digital tie that linked me to Maple Creek and the Carter name. As I stepped onto the narrow aircraft staircase, a cold gust of wind whipped loose strands of my brown hair across my face. I paused for one heartbeat, glancing back toward the sprawling regional airport parking lot. For a fleeting second, I imagined I could see Jake's white pickup truck tearing through the entrance gates, but he was in a holding cell now, denied bail. He would never reach the airport. He would never touch me or my son again. I settled into my window seat once on board, securing Leo in the fold-down bassinet mounted to the cabin wall beside me. The flight attendant offered a warm, sympathetic smile as she handed me a small bottle of water and a pack of honey lemon lozenges. She noted my tear-streaked cheeks and the sleeping toddler tucked safely beside me, and she simply patted my shoulder and said, "Wherever you're going, I hope it's home." I nodded, throat tight. It will be. The wheels left the ground with a gentle jolt, and Maple Creek shrank beneath me, a patchwork of frost-dusted farm fields, clapboard suburban homes, and the white steeple of the historic Baptist church. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass window, letting silent tears slide down my jaw. I grieved not for my cruel husband or his judgmental family, but for the naive young woman I had once been, the girl who dreamed of a loyal marriage, a loving extended family, and a quiet life rooted in small-town tradition and faith. Those gentle dreams had died slowly, smothered beneath endless criticism, hidden deception, and repeated emotional neglect. What remained was a hardened, protective mother determined to build a safer, kinder future for her only child. Leo stirred as the plane climbed to cruising altitude, his tiny fingers curling around the edge of his stuffed brown bear. He blinked sleepy blue eyes up at me, his voice thick with grogginess. "Where we go, Mommy?" I brushed a stray crumb from his cheek, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. "We're going to stay with Grandma Eleanor in Ireland, baby. A little coastal village where the wind smells like salt, and no one will ever shout at us or make us feel small." He nodded slowly, snuggling back against his plush toy, already drifting toward sleep once more. My mother had relocated to the tiny Irish coastal town of Clonakilty 5 years prior, after my father passed away from a sudden heart attack. She had begged me countless times to leave Maple Creek, to escape the suffocating Carter family dynamic, but I had clung to misplaced hope that Jake would one day change his cruel, controlling habits. I regretted every single month I had wasted waiting for a redemption that was never coming. But I also recognized that those wasted months had given me time to build an ironclad case, to stockpile ammunition, to become the kind of woman who could walk out of a Thanksgiving dinner and into a brand new life without a backward glance. I pulled the folded diamond necklace receipt from my coat pocket, unfolding the crumpled paper carefully between my thumb and forefinger. I studied the embossed jewelry store lettering, the timestamp dated 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the expensive platinum pendant engraved with another woman's initials. This single slip of paper had been the final push that convinced me to execute my escape on Thanksgiving Day rather than waiting until Christmas. I had spent months gathering every shred of proof against Jake: falsified construction project expense reports, bank records showing illegal client fund diversion, hundreds of pages of explicit text messages exchanged with Tanya Summers, hotel stay confirmations from weekend trips he had lied about taking for business purposes. I had also gathered evidence against Marcus Carter, who had colluded with Jake on 3 fraudulent bridge repair contracts, and evidence against County Commissioner Ronald Blake, who had accepted bribes to overlook safety violations. The midnight email to the FBI would bring down the whole rotten network. I had not acted out of blind vengeance. I had acted to strip corrupt, deceitful men of power they had never earned, and to protect every future victim they might have fleeced. Midway through the 7-hour transatlantic flight, I drifted into a fitful, fragmented sleep. I dreamed of the Thanksgiving dining room once again, of 20 pairs of icy judgmental eyes fixed firmly on my trembling frame, of Jake's sharp, unyielding command echoing through the crowded room: apologize or leave. But in this dream, I didn't hesitate. I threw the butter knife onto the floor and said, "No, Jake, you apologize, to me and to every person you've stolen from." And then the dining room walls dissolved into Irish sea cliffs, and Leo was laughing on the beach. I jolted awake with a sharp gasp, palms dry, heart full. Not a nightmare. A prophecy. When the plane touched down at Cork International Airport, soft Irish rain streaked across the cabin windows, mist curling around rolling green hills dotted with stone farm walls and grazing sheep. My mother waited just beyond customs, her gray hair wrapped beneath a knitted wool shawl, warm tears glistening in her eyes as she spotted us through the crowd of weary travelers. She pulled me into a gentle embrace the second I reached her, her hands rubbing slow, soothing circles across my back. No words of judgment crossed her lips, no "I told you so" lectures lingered on her tongue. She simply held me close and said, "You did it, my brave girl. You actually did it." We loaded our suitcases into her compact hatchback vehicle, Leo secured in a borrowed child car seat in the back row, and drove the 40-minute coastal road toward Clonakilty. The air carried a sharp, briny ocean scent mixed with damp peat moss and blooming wild gorse. Small colorful storefronts lined narrow village streets, locals waved gently from front porches, and whitewashed cottages clustered along rugged cliff edges overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. For the first time since marrying Jake, I breathed without the heavy weight of constant anxiety pressing against my chest. I was home. My mother's cottage sat at the quiet edge of the village, a small 2-bedroom home with a flower-filled backyard and a weathered wooden front porch that overlooked a small tidal inlet. She had spent weeks preparing our living space, stocking the kitchen with Leo's favorite applesauce and honey oatmeal, hanging soft cream-colored curtains across the bedroom windows, arranging a pile of children's storybooks beside a cozy armchair in the living room. The moment we stepped across the threshold, the faint smell of freshly baked soda bread wrapped around us like a warm blanket. I set our luggage beside the hallway coat rack, lifted my sleepy son into my arms, and knew we had finally found somewhere we truly belonged. The first 2 weeks in Clonakilty slipped by in slow, peaceful increments. I established a gentle daily routine: early morning walks along the coastal footpath, weekly visits to the village library, Sunday services at the local parish church, quiet afternoons spent baking and gardening alongside my mother. I rarely checked my email, choosing instead to step away entirely from the chaos unfolding back in Ohio. But Mandy kept me updated through encrypted texts to my disposable phone. Jake's construction company had filed for bankruptcy within 10 days of Thanksgiving. Every long-term client had terminated their contracts the second the fraud evidence landed. Local banks had frozen all his accounts. The church council had voted unanimously to ban him from all parish events. Neighbors who had once praised him now crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Tanya Summers had fled to Florida, her real estate license suspended pending an ethics investigation. Marcus Carter had been arrested alongside Jake after the FBI raid, his own fraudulent contracts exposed by the midnight email. County Commissioner Blake had resigned in disgrace, his bribery scandal splashed across the front page of the Columbus Dispatch. The whole house of cards had collapsed, and I had only had to nudge the first card. And Margaret had suffered a mild stress-induced stroke 3 weeks following our departure, confined to a rehabilitation center miles outside of Maple Creek. Mandy wrote that her mother's first words upon waking in the hospital were, "That woman destroyed my son." Not a word of remorse for her own cruelty, not a single acknowledgement of the crimes her golden boy had committed. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was small and distant, like the memory of a burn that had long since healed. One gray, rainy Tuesday afternoon, I sat at my mother's kitchen table sorting through a folder of legal documents, preparing to file formal proceedings for full sole custody of Leo. The kitchen floor held a thin, permanent crack running beneath the vintage cast-iron sink, a small familiar landmark I had memorized during my first week in the cottage. Rain tapped steadily against the bay window, and an old wall clock ticked slow, rhythmic seconds. I twisted the empty band on my left finger out of old habit, pausing when a new encrypted message pinged on my disposable phone screen. Mandy's message was shorter and more urgent than any she had sent previously. Jake, despite his arrest and impending trial, had retained a high-profile family law attorney, filed emergency cross-country custody paperwork, and planned to petition the Irish courts for visitation rights. He claimed I had abducted our child unlawfully, fleeing to manipulate custody outcomes. He had even leaked a heavily edited version of the Thanksgiving dinner incident to several regional news outlets, painting himself as a wronged, devoted husband driven to desperation by my sudden, cruel abandonment. The audacity was staggering. My fingers turned icy as I read each typed line. I had anticipated Jake would fight for custody, not out of genuine paternal love, but to regain control over the one piece of his old life he could still attempt to reclaim. I would not allow my gentle, sheltered son to be dragged back into that toxic orbit. I immediately scheduled a consultation with a reputable local Irish family law solicitor, packing every piece of evidence I had compiled against Jake into a waterproof legal folder: financial fraud records, infidelity documentation, witness statements from former church volunteers, Mandy's confidential written accounts of the Thanksgiving humiliation, medical notes from my physician detailing years of stress-related anxiety triggered by marital emotional neglect. I planned to lay every painful truth bare before the Irish family court judge. The evening before my first legal consultation, I received an unexpected international phone call. Mandy's quiet, exhausted voice filtered through the line, heavy with suppressed grief and quiet resolve. She paused for her customary 2-second beat before speaking. "I've sent a signed sworn affidavit to your solicitor's email address," she began, her voice barely louder than the patter of Irish rain outside my window. "I witnessed every second of that Thanksgiving dinner humiliation. I can testify to 6 years of Jake's controlling behavior, his repeated lies, the way Margaret systematically isolated you. I also included written proof that Jake planned to use shared parental custody as leverage to force you back into a toxic marriage arrangement. And I sent the recordings, Clara. Hours of his late-night rants where he admitted he never intended to allow you an independent life. He called you his property. He said he'd break you down until you forgot how to leave. Those recordings are going to bury him in court." A quiet, heavy breath escaped my chest. Mandy had existed as a background, overlooked character in my painful Maple Creek narrative, a silent observer trapped beneath her mother's domineering thumb. But she had quietly documented every harmful incident, waiting for the moment she could safely break free and offer me the crucial support I required. She had emerged as my most vital, unexpected ally. "Why risk everything for me?" I asked softly. "Margaret will never forgive you for testifying against her son." Mandy's bitter, weary laugh crackled across the international line. "I spent 40 years living to earn my mother's conditional approval, Clara. I watched her crush every woman who dared to step outside the narrow, obedient role she assigned. I refused to spend the rest of my life letting fear dictate every choice. You gave me the courage to walk away. The least I can do is protect you and Leo." We spoke for a few more minutes, exchanging words of quiet encouragement, before ending the call. I folded my hands beneath my chin, staring out the rain-streaked kitchen window toward the churning gray Atlantic. I had spent months convinced I stood alone, but a quiet, overlooked ally had stood beside me all along, gathering strength in the shadows. Jake arrived in Clonakilty 3 days later, accompanied by his high-priced American legal counsel and a private Irish barrister. He was out on bail pending his fraud trial, a condition his lawyers had exploited to argue he was still a fit parent. I spotted him once in the village main street, lingering outside the small local courthouse, his tailored navy suit starkly out of place beside weathered fishermen's jumpers. When our eyes accidentally met across the crowded sidewalk, he adjusted his dress shirt cuff, the same nervous, habitual gesture he always performed before uttering a lie, and offered a practiced, remorseful smile. I turned away without hesitation, gripping Leo's small hand tighter in mine. I would not fall victim to his manipulative charm a second time. I had walked through fire once. I wasn't about to step back into the flames just because he'd learned to cry on cue. The family court hearing unfolded over 2 long, emotionally draining days inside a small, wood-paneled courtroom lined with tall frosted windows. The judge, a calm, thoughtful middle-aged woman with decades of family law experience, listened patiently as Jake's legal team laid out their case. They framed my international escape as unlawful parental abduction, described Jake as a wrongfully betrayed father, and painted the Thanksgiving confrontation as a minor domestic disagreement exaggerated for vengeful personal gain. Jake took the witness stand, voice steady and remorseful as he delivered his rehearsed testimony, omitting every instance of financial fraud, repeated infidelity, and years of emotional control. He shed manufactured tears as he described missing his young son's daily milestones, glancing directly at me across the courtroom in a transparent attempt to trigger guilt. When my legal team began presenting our mountain of compiled evidence, the polished mask Jake had worn throughout the hearing slowly crumbled. Bank records, hotel receipts, explicit text message logs, and the damning diamond necklace receipt were submitted as formal exhibits, proving his years of calculated deception. Witness statements from Maple Creek church leaders and former business partners detailed his pattern of greedy, unethical behavior. Mandy appeared via secure video call from her Ohio apartment, delivering her sworn, unflinching eyewitness testimony regarding the Thanksgiving humiliation and Jake's long history of controlling emotional abuse. Her deliberate 2-second pause before answering each cross-examination question reinforced her credibility. The pivotal final piece of evidence arrived when my solicitor submitted the hours of secret audio recordings Mandy had captured. The courtroom fell utterly silent as Jake's cold, arrogant voice echoed through the speaker system, admitting he planned to weaponize custody proceedings to force my return, calling me his property, vowing to break me down. The judge's expression hardened. She paused her note-taking and simply stared at Jake with an expression of cold, professional disgust. When closing arguments concluded, the judge retired to deliberate. I sat beside my mother on the wooden bench, Leo curled peacefully against my lap, his small fingers tangled in the hem of my wool cardigan. Jake sat alone across the aisle, shoulders hunched, his practiced remorse replaced by raw, unmasked fear. After 90 minutes, the judge returned and granted me full, permanent sole legal and physical custody of Leo, denying every one of Jake's requests. She cited overwhelming evidence of long-term emotional domestic abuse, financial criminality, and proven risk of parental alienation. Jake would retain only supervised, quarterly video call access, monitored by a third-party social worker. Should he violate any terms or face conviction for his embezzlement charges, all remote contact privileges would be permanently revoked. The judge also noted, on the record, that Mr. Carter's conduct as a husband and father represents a profound failure of character, and recommended the U.S. authorities expedite his pending criminal proceedings. Jake buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with bitter, defeated sobs. For the first time in 6 years, I witnessed him stripped of every charming deflection, every calculated lie. He was no longer Maple Creek's golden boy, no longer the respected patriarch. He was simply a broken, greedy man who had spent too long believing his privilege would shield him from consequences. I felt no rush of vengeful triumph, only a deep, weary relief that my son and I were finally protected. We exited the courthouse into soft, misty Irish drizzle. My solicitor shook my hand firmly, congratulating me on securing a just, protective ruling. I glanced back over my shoulder one final time, catching sight of Jake lingering on the courthouse steps, staring after us with hollow, defeated eyes. He adjusted his shirt cuff one last time, a meaningless habitual gesture now stripped of its power, before turning to follow his legal team toward a waiting rental car. I never saw him again. In the months following the custody ruling, I rebuilt my life within the quiet, welcoming village of Clonakilty. I registered my home-based freelance bookkeeping business with local Irish Revenue Services, securing steady work supporting small family farms, village bakeries, and regional charitable organizations. I volunteered each Saturday morning at the town's community food bank, drawing on the church outreach experience I had gained back in Maple Creek, now choosing service rooted in genuine compassion. Leo flourished within the tight-knit village community, making friends at the local preschool, exploring tide pools along the rugged coastal shoreline, and growing accustomed to a household defined by gentle patience and emotional safety. I kept in occasional contact with Mandy, exchanging brief quarterly emails. She had enrolled in part-time college courses studying social work, hoping to dedicate her career to supporting survivors of domestic emotional manipulation. Margaret remained in long-term residential rehabilitation, never regaining her former domineering capacity. Jake had pleaded guilty to multiple felony embezzlement charges 6 months after our custody hearing, receiving a 5-year state prison sentence with early parole eligibility only upon completion of court-mandated anger management and domestic violence rehabilitation programs. Marcus Carter received 3 years. County Commissioner Blake was convicted on bribery charges and served 18 months. Tanya Summers lost her real estate license permanently and moved to Nevada. The whole rotten network had been dismantled, and I had been the architect of its destruction, not through violence, but through patience, documentation, and the simple, radical act of refusing to stay silent. One crisp, golden autumn Sunday afternoon, 3 full years after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner in Maple Creek, I walked hand in hand with Leo along the windswept coastal footpath overlooking Clonakilty Bay. The ocean breeze carried the sharp salt tang of the Atlantic, mixed with the sweet earthy scent of fallen bracken and wild blackberry bushes ripening along the trail edges. Leo, now 6 years old, pointed excitedly toward a flock of seabirds wheeling high above the churning gray waves, his childish laughter echoing across the quiet cliffside. I paused beside a weathered wooden bench, settling onto its splintered planks and patting the empty space beside me for my young son to sit. I pulled the worn silver wedding band from my coat pocket, the metal smooth and thin from years of anxious twisting. I rolled the simple band between my thumb and forefinger, reflecting on the woman I had been when I first slipped it onto my left hand, hopeful, trusting, desperate to belong. That naive young woman had not wasted her years entirely. She had learned resilience, cultivated quiet courage, and fought fiercely to protect the most precious person in her world. I did not toss the ring into the churning ocean waves in a dramatic gesture of final rejection. Instead, I tucked it gently into the inner pocket of Leo's favorite canvas backpack, a quiet reminder that painful chapters do not need to be erased entirely to make space for healing new beginnings. It was also, I realized with a small smile, a reminder that even the smallest, most unassuming objects, a ring, a receipt, a butter knife, could become weapons of liberation in the hands of a woman who refused to be silenced. "Mommy, why do you keep that old ring?" Leo asked, tilting his head to study the faint glint of silver. I brushed a wind-tousled strand of hair from his forehead, my gaze drifting out toward the endless blue stretch of the Atlantic horizon. "It's a reminder that sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead us to the safest homes, baby. We don't have to stay in places that make us small to be worthy of love." Leo nodded slowly, wrapping his small hand around mine and leaning his head against my shoulder. Somewhere in the distant village below, a church bell began to ring slow, steady chimes across the rolling green hills. The wind whispered soft through tall coastal grass, and for the first time in my adult life, I did not feel the urge to twist an empty ring on my finger or seek out a quiet hidden corner to escape overwhelming pressure. I was exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by gentle faith, loyal family, quiet community, and the unconditional love of my only child. And on a shelf in my mother's cottage, tucked inside a hollowed-out Jane Austen novel, Was the USB drive that had started it all, a relic of a war I had won, a testament to the truth that silence is not safety, and that the quietest women often hold the loudest secrets. Our happy ending was not perfect. The scars from years of emotional neglect still lingered, faint but permanent, etched into the quiet corners of my heart. Jake would spend years paying legal and criminal consequences for his greed and deceit, never fully reconciling with the family he had destroyed. Mandy would continue healing from a lifetime of maternal emotional abuse, one small brave choice at a time. Some fractures could never be fully mended, some relationships lost forever beyond the possibility of forgiveness. Still, we had each claimed our second chance, choosing kindness over cruelty, truth over deception, and self-respect over endless obedience to those who demanded we shrink ourselves to fit their narrow expectations. As the sun dipped low toward the ocean horizon, painting the Irish sky in soft hues of amber and rose, I squeezed Leo's hand gently in mine and breathed in the sharp, freeing salt wind. They had told me to apologize or leave that brutal Thanksgiving evening years ago. I had chosen to walk away, carrying proof of every hidden lie and quiet cruelty in my pocket. In leaving, I had not only saved myself from a lifetime of emotional captivity. I had given my son a life rooted in safety, compassion, and the quiet justice every wronged soul deserved. And I had proved, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the butter knife of a quiet wife could cut deeper than any sword, if she was patient enough to let the world see the blade. Some doors closed so we might finally step into the light waiting on the other side. Some tables must be overturned completely so that we might build better ones, with seats for everyone who was ever told to apologize for simply existing.